Thank you, Rihanna and Mark, for this interview and this
My pleasure.
conversation on. Let me start by quoting the French philosopher André Malraux, and he supposedly said, "Virtual, otherwise there won't be a 21st century." So, what do you think of the declaration or the claim that, in a similar way, the Hare Krishna Vaishnavism in the West among Westerners will have to be in terms of Western clothes, Western cultural, external cultural language, otherwise there just won't be?
Well, one thing that has often plagued religious societies throughout history is hypocrisy. And so it seems odd to, because it's emphasized in our sacred texts, that we are not the body, we're eternal souls, and yet to give so much importance, to dress, because if I'm not my body, if I'm a soul, I'm even less the clothes on my body. That's another level removed. It's another step removed from me, the soul. I think we could make argument from sociology and our own purposes that we should, be decent. We should dress decently. We should, I believe, dress in a way which is, as far as possible, culturally neutral. We know that there's a big emphasis now on diversity. It's a little different in the sense that here I am, where I stay in LA, and it's just a 15 to 20-minute walk to UCLA, which is one of the best universities anywhere. And I do, when I walk there, which I do at least a few times a week, and I've been doing that for how our students dress. And it hasn't changed very much at all since I went to college. That would be, maybe 55 years ago, over half a century ago. And students pretty much dress the same. Of course, the weather here in Los Angeles allows a certain casualness of dress, but it hasn't changed that much. So we are trying to communicate. It seems to me that dressing normally within the cultural context we are in is very similar to speaking the local language. Krishna consciousness, let's say in Los Angeles or Milwaukee or wherever, somewhere in America, and I'm not speaking to an immigrant community that mostly speaks a different language. Let's say just speaking to people who've been in America for a little while and speak English as their first language. So I'm going to speak to them in English. Why would I speak vocabulary, a syntax? They don't understand it well. Similarly, why would I distance myself from the people I'm trying to teach by dressing in a way which just makes me odd and exotic? Now, a certain percentage of people in the world like odd, but not for most people. And to verify that, just go walk down the street in a, let's say, an area which is reasonably not rich, but just comfortable. People in that area, majority of them are educated. And you'll see that things are not kaleidoscopic. There's always some new fashion, and there are people in the entertainment industry desperate for attention that have to dress like this or like that. But in general, there is a stable, now pretty old standard, so that I believe Krishna or God, it's very important to us not to discriminate and not to favor. As Krishna says in the Gita, we want to give everyone the same equal chance. And so if I dress in a very exotic way, I may be facilitating other people in their approach to Krishna because, that's, they like that particular ethnicity or whatever. Separation between myself and vast majority of the population. Let's say where I live in California or in Mexico or throughout the United States. So to me, it's not a question of my personal taste or what I like. It's the opposite. It's a question of what makes it easier for people to approach me. Further about our philosophies, I'm trying to facilitate, not make things more difficult.
If we accept the premise that theologically and historically, Vaishnavism is a tradition that never had a distinct, then as a historian, what's your commentary or what's your take on what happened in ISKCON? Because in ISKCON today, right, we see a state of affairs where many leaders, many devotees, the majority, we would honestly say, believe that there is such a thing as devotional dress. There's a Vaishnavism has a distinct uniform that distinguishes.
Well, that's a you're asking, or even psychological movements, or Prabhupada has his own opinion on that question, which is in Veda-based, the most authoritative database with Prabhupada's statements, and I think it's right here. Yeah, devotee asked Prabhupada about that. Why do we dress this way? He said, because you wanted to. I never said you had to do that. So yeah, there are some quotes. These are just similarly for this Prabhupada. If our purpose is Krishna consciousness, either I dress myself in this orange color, or either you dress in coat, pant, and shirt. Oh, there's no difference. There is no difference because the aim is the same. And there's so many quotes like that from Prabhupada. Yeah.
One of the arguments we hear for wearing traditional Indian clothes is that there's some sort of like the equivalent of, the imitatio Christos, like people who embody the, so they want to get.
Prabhupada said, because if you want to imitate Chaitanya, then just walk around barefoot. Don't take planes, don't drive cars, don't have a GPS. Chaitanya never used a computer. He didn't have a cell phone. So if you want to do it, do it. Of course, you'll be sort of most people, but that's very selective. Because we're using, Chaitanya never used a toaster oven, but I do.
So we're basically throwing away Yukta Vairagya.
Yeah, it's like, and also even the non-devotees that we're trying to, enlighten, they know that dressing this way or that way is not a big deal in terms of loving God or serving God. It's kind of a so-called fallen souls that we're trying to save have a better, more intelligent understanding of certain things that we are doing than we do.
If there's a link, what is this link then between this emphasis on wearing Indian clothes by the way?
In sociology, it can't be explained philosophically. So if we're looking for a philosophical explanation, you're going to look high and low and not find one. There's no philosophical explanation. The explanation is psychological and sociological. It's not philosophical.
Is there a link between what's going on and what we talk about in terms of the the takeover and this, no, without offending any Vaishnava who have Indian bodies, but the demographic sort of takeover of ISKCON.
Yeah, I don't think they're taking over. I think by default, they're just the ones doing the work.
Yes.
I mean, someone has to pay to keep the temples going, and they're the ones stepping forward. Someone has to serve the deities. Someone has to credit. They're heroes in their own way because they're stepping forward to keep everything going, to keep the lights on, to keep the deities worship. So and there's no criticism of them. I mean, much to the contrary, they deserve a lot of praise. The problem is that the Western preaching is just MIA. I mean, there are preaching programs going on in the Western world to Western people, but not enough to make ISKCON relevant in the West, outside the Indian diaspora. I mean, if you took a survey, even how many people have heard of the Hare Krishna movement in America, it's not going to be a big number. And you're probably a very big vision, make establishing the Yuga Dharma, the spiritual process for this age, and that's light years away. And we're not moving toward it. It's not that, well, we're not there yet, but we're steadily making progress. The one area where there is progress, and again, this is due to the sincerity and intelligence of Western background, and that is establishing rational, effective social structures in ISKCON. For example, care for the elderly, or educational programs, Sunday schools, distribution of literature, although for the most part to whether or not, or to the need to actually give out books that people can read and understand. That doesn't all seem to be important. So, but there are many good devotees, and who are admirable, and who are devoted, and working sincerely, working hard for the mission. Many very. However, um, and devotees from a Hindu background, of course, now they're Vaishnavas, but they deserve to be praised. They're great souls who have sincerely stepped forward to.
Yeah, they stepped up.
Yes. So it's nothing like a takeover. It's just sort of like, well, no one else can do it. We'll do it.
But would have the Western mission been stronger if, since the last 50 years, devotees had placed less stress on Indian clothes and had, especially the householders, adjusted to a local way of. I believe, for example, that someone like, with all the admiration I have for them, like a Kalakantapur or Vaisheshik, these wonderful, wonderful senior Grihastha devotees, perhaps if they had adjusted to a more local culture, when they were in the prime and the beginning of their householder life, perhaps by now today they would have as many, wonderful Indian disciples, but many, many more. So as a whole, individually and as a whole, do you think we would have had more success if?
Well, they're such good devotees. I mean, and I admire very much their service. So I don't want to criticize them directly or indirectly. I will. History. I believe that it's pretty obvious if you pay attention to history, you pay attention to social science, that we need to establish, or not establish, wrong word, we need to fortify and expand our Western mission. I've quoted these things so many times, or Prabhupada talks about it often in the Bhagavatam, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, in other books. So there's indisputable evidence that Prabhupada himself wanted us to become known as uh, American Vaishnavas.
There's even the quote with, Balavanta Prabhu.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, in a sense, it depends on all of us. The future depends on all of us, and I feel, of course, that I should do more. I don't want to criticize others or blame others. Rather, if I wouldn't criticize anyone, I should probably criticize myself. And I tried to do something, but I feel like I could have done more. Or now I think Krishna will be more pleased if I criticize myself and not other senior devotees.
I say that, I mean, I know I feel guilty about having
No,
mentioned these names. I
no,
respect
no.
them
It's
fully. I feel like, I'm a LeBron James and other big players, and it's like, guys, you're playing with unnecessary lead in your sneakers. Like, take it out, and then we'll score a lot more points. We'll win the title and so on.
well, maybe Krishna again. I don't want to directly or indirectly. I don't want to say that these illustrious godbrothers have lead in their sneakers, but I will say that there's an urgent need to do more. I hold myself responsible. I don't want to criticize the others, but so what I think I could do more, and I should try to do more actively.
Right, but as far as Prabhupada, you agree that from all the quotes we have from him, he seemed to be very much in the mood of, son is like, come as you are, as long as you're clean. What the Bhagavatam says too. Am I right? Or am I wrong?
No, of course. There's no dress code in the Bhagavatam. There's no dress code in the Bhagavad Gita. There's no uniforms. In fact, actually, ironically, there is a dress code in the Bhagavatam, but it's something obviously inappropriate today. Like for example, sannyasis have basically three options: streaking, which not really viable for many reasons nowadays. Another option is tree bark. I wonder what they did, how they wore tree bark back then, before they invented Velcro. Maybe someone just sewed it for them or whatever. But naked tree bark with or without Velcro, and rejected. It said in the Bhagavatam, renunciates to wear deer skin, but then Lord Chaitanya told renunciates not to because they're details. It's very easy to prove that the dress codes which are in the Bhagavatam and which Lord Chaitanya would never want us to follow, even though it's the Bhagavatam, there's just time and place things. And the real issue is was Krishna himself, yet he adopted the order and the dress of a sannyasi so that people will listen to him. Otherwise, here's this young, really handsome guy who, and Lord Chaitanya, and yet he took sannyas and shaved off his beautiful hair. Why? Because it was they're pragmatists. It's stated in the Bhagavatam, in the prayers of Queen Kunti, where she says that Krishna, you appear before us, nato natya taro jata, like an actor in costume. So whatever Krishna wore 5,000 years ago, it was just an act. It was like an actor in costume. It wasn't like the eternal dress of the spiritual world. We find it like an actor in costume. And then in the first chapter of the Bhagavatam, it said, Kritavan Kila Karmani Saharamena Kesava, that Kesava performs pastimes together with his brother Balaram, Gudaka, disguised, pretending to be a human being.
That implies that's not the original form of Krishna,
No,
or the original
but the externals, how he dressed, did he use, what kind of,
trappings.
no, the Indian mascara, cudgel. So those are all just cultural details. And we don't live in that culture anymore. So there are injunctions of Bhagavatam about how to dress. None of the acharyas follow the for the day. And that's all in the category of details, not basic principles. So to mistake to mistake a basic principle for detail, or to think of basic principles as detail, or a detail as a basic principle, just means that one is not a spiritual scientist. It's supposed to undergo time and place evaluation. If you take that and a detail like dress, which Prabhupada says is a death thing, it's not our real interest, then one simply is not a spiritual scientist. I mean, the fact that a science exists, whether it's a science of metals, or science, or medical science, or science of engineering, there is won't help. So Prabhupada did give us a spiritual science. The question is now, do we have leaders who are spiritual scientists, who actually know all these powerful statements Prabhupada made?
Well, to play the devil's advocate, because we'll hear, and then I'll finish with this. There are quotes in the Vedas where Prabhupada seems to, for example, I'll quote you three. He talks about how someone looks, historically brought back saris from India for his first female disciples. The analogy, like for saffron-clad, dhoti-wearing brahmacharis, they look like angels from Vaikuntha.
However, that last quote, the other ones are not very important. That last quote is very interesting. Point out the two very different ways, you could say opposite ways, that Prabhupada uses the English word opinion, common English word opinion. And Prabhupada often said, "This is not my opinion. This is the absolute truth." He said it publicly all the time. And so he would say that about the basic philosophical principles. As I proved in my essay,
The link will be in the description.
that I never gave you my opinion. When did I ever give my opinion? This is not my opinion. And then there's a whole other group of statements where Prabhupada says, well, my opinion is, or that's just my opinion. And then he says, I never gave my opinion. If you look, whenever Prabhupada says it is not talking about principles and descriptions directly found in the scriptures. And when Prabhupada says, well, my opinion is, that's just my opinion, which he also says often, he's talking about things that are not in scriptures. Like, let's say you want to cook lunch today, and you say, well, I'd rather cook. It's not an absolute truth. It's just his personal taste. And so, Prabhupada once wrote to me when I was a householder in 1971 in Gainesville, and I'd asked him something. He wrote to me, and he was explaining about what he called philosophical speculation. And he said that, he gave the example that Krishna says, so if you speculate, is that really true? That's mental speculation. If you accept that Krishna's statement is true, then try to understand, well, how is it true? What does that mean? That's philosophical speculation, which we're allowed to do. Yeah, we have to be spiritual scientists. There's so many quotes in Prabhupada, So all the people that claim they're, big, all people that claim that they are strictly following Prabhupada, if you basic principle in detail, then you don't understand the spiritual science. That's in chapter 6 of Nectar Devotion, stated by H.D.Goswami, and then by Prabhupada translated.
Isn't there a debate between precisely what is a principle, what is a debate, what is a detail?
Oh, that's any child can understand that. I mean, when Prabhupada says, first of all, how to dress is not listed in the Nectar Devotion as one of the basic principles, and clothes you wear are a fundamental principle of Bhakti Yoga. First of all, Prabhupada said, no, here's a quote from Prabhupada, we're not concerned with dress. Dress is a dead thing. So if someone's trying to argue that these so-called uniforms or,
Devotional clothes.
devotional clothes and so on, these are basic principles. They have their philosophies. There's so many quotes from Prabhupada saying that the clothes are just a dead thing. We don't care about clothes. We care about the nature of the soul within the.
Spiritual thing.
Yeah, we need to be spiritual scientists, not just. But that's the problem. It's just like the problem with so many scientists is that they don't study philosophy anymore. So therefore, they just come to very illogical, literally illogical. And so similarly, the way I put it, it seems like for every real philosopher that's done, there are 100 astrologers. The Prabhupada said we have the mass, we need the class. So the class means educated, intelligent people that can understand and then present Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, if one just makes outlandish claims about devotional dress and it doesn't really affect people's opinion of us, these things are just bizarrely out of touch with reality. It's funny because Prabhupada once said, oh, if someone's a gentleman, they don't care about dress. Prabhupada said, strange, was a huge fad in America. Everyone was doing that.
And even the hippie, like I typed on ChatGPT once, what's the actual percentage of the hippie community in America in the 60s? And it's actually really small. So even then.
Well, there weren't only hippies. Like, for example, like I was in Berkeley. That was in the East Bay, and the West Bay was San Francisco. And the hippies were in San Francisco. I mean, it's not that they were all in San Francisco, but Berkeley was more political activism. And they weren't hippies. I mean, they wouldn't call themselves hippies.
It was still hip to dress differently.
Yeah. And to be kind of a freak.
Still, I would bet that even that population was still really small compared to mainstream America.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Thank you. Any concluding words?
The truth is what works. Yeah, I mean, we're trying to do things a certain way at Krishna West, and acting our educated professional people, which is not always the case. Western people, and not always the case with general preaching. So, when a devotee wants to preach the disguise, what do we say it is? Hatha yoga, or it's just funny how there's so much that's devotees, and I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just a human trait. I don't know if it's more of a devotee trait than a general human trait. But when someone starts doing something, everyone does it. Like I remember, some devotee selling incense.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, but then everybody did that. And then one temple started, making candles in the temple, selling candles, and everyone sold candles. And then they've had this scam where they bought, that's when they used to make just regular vinyl albums. And so, there's record companies for every album that really sells. Maybe they're just stuck with them. They're in the warehouse. So I remember in those days you'd get them for like, a nickel an album or something, or less. And so devotees would, I remember they'd go to, for some reason, again, so one devotee, what they did is they went to they'd go to the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles. You know this?
Um,
Over in the DMV parking lot, and they'd say, "Good morning, we're from radio station KRSNA." And then they'd ask them a couple of questions like, you're on the air. And at the end, okay, now we'd like to give you this album. We're doing this for charity, and then everyone started doing that. Everyone started going to the DMV, and everyone, sell the van and called people over to the van, and everyone said, "We're from radio station KRSNA." And when they made candles, everyone made the same candles, and then they had knockoff paintings. The days when, I don't know, Hong Kong or Vietnam, all these countries, you could get very, very cheap labor. So it's funny because in the but there, some little guy was just sitting on the ground there with a little sponge and a few brushes. In 20 minutes he'd knock off a Cezanne or a Van Gogh. Can't imagine why anyone would want it. Anyway, Van Gogh, but they just started sort of, neurotic flower vases, vibrating. But anyway, so then everyone did that, and then they paintings, and then everyone was selling paintings, and then they found that fundraising, the Indians, it's the best fundraising thing. And I don't mean to say the devotees don't care about the Indian devotees or they were tricking them. I mean, I think they really are accepted and respected certainly by any good devotee. I mean to say is everybody kind of, it's funny because Prabhupada said a few times, I looked this up and I wrote a research thing on it. A few times Prabhupada said that, you can call women Mataji. What's interesting is Prabhupada never did it. I checked the entire Veda base. There is no evidence that Prabhupada ever called a woman Mataji. Not only that, it's not even an Indian custom. It's a Bengali custom. And I've spoken to educated Indians from other parts of India who think it's strange. So, but then everyone does that. And so now, of course, with the internet and people live in different places, so there's more diversity of opinion, but so why do devotees do certain, or like things which are just like bizarre and irrational? For example, you can't go on the altar if you have stitched clothing. No one has ever explained to me scientifically why stitches are impure. And there are pictures of Prabhupada installing Radha and Krishna, worshiping Radha and Krishna. But it's just some old book in Sanskrit says something, or someone heard something from someone in India, and then what Prabhupada actually said is ignored, or what Prabhupada actually did, but some baseless superstition travels like wildfire all around the ISKCON world. And or another one, which is one of my favorites, is I call it sort of like the the Harry Potter version of Bhakti Yoga, and that is that when you're chanting Gayatri mantra, you have to cover your right hand, the one that's on the thread, with the left hand, so that I don't know some kind of bias activities. It's amazing that there's all these malevolent beings floating around the atmosphere, and they can subtly penetrate right hands but not left hands. First interesting thing. They can penetrate a right hand, but they bounce off. Even like the all natural cloth, they just bounce. They bounce off cloth. They bounce off left hands. They penetrate right hands. We never find out really who they are, what the process is. They just sort of bring us some kind of subtle tools that pump out all of your pious credits. It's just, I mean, I just find it bizarre. We say, my disciples are not reading my books.
Do you think it's coming from not reading Prabhupada's books?
They're just not being philosophical. I remember that one time when I was CBC of Atlanta, one nice girl came and joined, moved into the Brahmacharya ashram. She came to me after a few days, and she told me that I thought this was a spiritual community. Yeah. Said, well, I was sleeping. I fell asleep, and I drooled a little bit when I woke up. The girls in the women's ashram going crazy, like, bringing ghosts and evil spirits because you drooled. And so you have to, shower and change your clothes. It's just, I thought this is a spiritual community. It's more like some kind of. And so,
She said those very words.
yeah, something very close. I mean, I'm just closely paraphrasing her. So, where's the spiritual science, philosophy, real philosophy? Not just, Prabhupada said that, religion without philosophy is just sentimental, or if you know the philosophy, you know philosophy. But it's not just a question of memorizing a credo, even if that confession of faith is true, as is the case in Krishna consciousness. But philosophy means you know how to reason. You know how to reason. So Prabhupada said we have the masses, we need the class. And so I think, ISKCON definitely, I think the only thing the world will really accept from us on a large scale outside of India and diaspora India, a real spiritual science. Not all these superstitions, not all these legends and astrology. I was with Prabhupada when the first devotees came into his room and asked him if they could do astrology in ISKCON. Prabhupada said no. Of course, they do it anyway, but he said on Krishna, and that this would sort of weaken one's dependence on Krishna, depend on the stars. Okay, so maybe we'll stop there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.